Do you go live on your Twitter or the official or account Twitter? Your Twitter right now, right?
Yeah, it is. We are live right now on my Twitter and my Facebook, and then my Twitch. I can change that to the actual Twitter once we actually start getting people to follow. But right now, I feel like the easiest way is for people to just click mine and go, "Oh, okay." Yeah. But yep, we are live. Second episode of the Bets and Booze podcast. Tyler gets it confused, said booze and bet. So, we might say something different every week. It really just depends. First question, what are we drinking tonight? I'm drinking a Makers, and this Trader Joe's has this apple cider fall mix. So I mixed that in there. It's pretty good.
Keeping it classic. Michelob Ultra.
Michelob. Respect that. Tyler, I don't know if people saw on Twitter, has just a whole ass cup filled with Jack Daniels.
It's mostly Diet Coke, but
yeah, sure. We'll figure out quickly into the show how much Diet Coke actually in there.
We'll see how much Diet Coke.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so I figured the first thing we could start with would be the Thursday night NFL matchup because that's about to kick off in an hour or so. So the Patriots, or not the Patriots, I don't know. I had Tom Brady on the mind, so I said the Patriots. The Tampa Bay Bucks are traveling to Philly to play the Eagles, and Tampa Bay is favored by 6. And obviously, I have my own thoughts on this, but I was kind of just curious what you guys think about this game. If Philly could give the Bucks, a little bit of trouble, I think Philly's a feisty team.
So I actually bet this game earlier today. Before I got 2 parlays. I took the over and Eagles spread, and then I took the over and Eagles money line. That was prior to me realizing that the Auburn DBs are coming back apparently tonight. We'll see if they actually come back, but if they are, I'm going to be a little more worried about my bet. But I'm still all over the over. I think both these teams are going to score. But now I'm a little more worried about the Philly bet now because it was already killing me as a Cowboys fan to bet on them. But maybe they'll come through in the clutch.
Who are the Auburn corners again? Just to refresh my mind.
Jamal Dean and who's the other one?
Dean's the one I remembered, but I couldn't for the life of me remember the other one. Sorry, I put you on the spot, but I was just curious because I'd forgotten myself.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
Well, I mean, they're Auburn corners, so they're easily forgettable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Noah Igbenogany.
they're already gone. You just take a low-key shot at me.
Yeah, just a low blow to start the show.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of like Philly this year, and Jalen Hurts has kind of impressed me, and I thought he could be a decent, serviceable quarterback, but he's already taken a huge step in year 2, and he's looked solid. They put up some pretty big numbers, and Devontae Smith, thankfully, had a rough first game or 2, and then he's kind of been coming into his own, which makes me happy. I don't know. I think I would probably pick Philly to win this one over the. Wait, so it's Philly Patriots, right? I thought it was Philly.
No. Philly Bucks. I screwed that up.
Okay, I was gonna say now. Philly Bucks. I'm still taking the Bucks, and I think that they'll win pretty handily. I mean, the Bucks, in my opinion, are maybe one of the best teams in the league, if not the best team in the league. I know that's not a super hot take. They're the defending Super Bowl champions, but Tom Brady's been statistically the best quarterback in the NFL this year. And he's doing, he's done it with Gronk went down and they had one rough week, and then now he's just back to being Tom Brady. So I think the Bucks will win pretty handily, but I think the Philadelphia Eagles are on the right track. And I also saw they have 3 first-round picks in the top 10 right now if the season ended today. So they got a bright future as well.
Yeah, I don't think Philly's going to win the game, but I think that if I had to pick, I didn't actually put a bet down on or anything, but I think they cover the spread. It's at home. It's a Thursday night game. Thursday night games typically tend to be kind of weird. And like I had talked about earlier, Philly has been very competitive this year. I actually think, they're the second best team in the division over Washington and over the New York Giants, which I guess really isn't saying all that much. But I'm very high on Philly because, like you talked about, Jalen Hurts has played well this year. I think Devontae Smith tonight is going to have a breakout game. He's kind of been, steadily trending upward for them. And so I think they cover the spread at 6 points, which is a decent amount, but I don't think they win. But I think going forward, Philly's future is, very bright with all the draft picks they have and the young players they already have in place there.
I agree. I think it's still going to take some time for them to become, really competitive, especially with the way the Cowboys are playing right now in that division. Go boys! It's great to see. Also, it was Carlton Davis was the one I forgot. I don't know how I forgot that. And then I forgot too. Apparently, Richard Sherman's playing now. I didn't realize he's already played in 2 games. Apparently,
He
secondary
started immediately after.
Yeah, that secondary is looking pretty nice. Antoine Winfield, the safety, is out though, so they might struggle there a little bit. But I mean, those are 3 really.
Smitty's going to have a couple deep touchdowns, maybe.
Who knows? I guess we'll see. He looks to be finding his groove. I mean, he's starting to look a lot more like the old connection with Hurts and Smith, but it's still not to that level. I mean, the NFL corners are just simply better than college. And I mean, it's going to take some time for him to adjust. But I could definitely see him having a breakout game tonight, but those corners are good. So we'll see.
One thing we haven't mentioned on the Philly side of the ball is that tight end Zach Goddard is out for this game due to COVID protocols. And so Zach Ertz, obviously they still have him. So he has kind of been overshadowed by Goddard this season. So I'm kind of looking for him to step up as well. So I'm looking for big games from Devontae Smith and Zach Ertz, selfishly too, because I'm playing both of them in fantasy. But I actually do think they're going to have good games. Otherwise, I wouldn't be playing them.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Ertz kind of struggled last week, which was surprising, even though Goddard was out. But I mean, Ertz has been a consistent guy for so many years. You never know when he's going to get back to that. I mean, it could be any moment now.
Yeah, the targets were there. I think he had just like a couple drops or so. I didn't get to watch the game, but I heard that he definitely struggled. So hopefully he'll pick it up tonight. But that's enough of the NFL talk. Time to dive into some. Yeah, we'll give score updates as we're going on here. But time to dive into college football, which was a very painful weekend for me. I won't dive into that too much right now. But just looking at the new AP rankings that came out, Georgia's at 1, obviously because Bama lost. Iowa's at 2 after beating Penn State. Cincy jumped from 5 to 3. Oklahoma moved from 6 to 4 after another. We just keep talking about this. Another close win for them, in which they should have lost.
They keep getting away with it.
Yeah,
they are who we thought they were, and we let them off the hook.
Exactly. And then Bama's at 5, didn't drop too much, thankfully. Ohio State went from 7 to 6, Penn State from 4 to 7, Michigan at 8 after previously being at 9, Oregon at 9 after previously being at 8, and then Michigan State moved from 11 inside the top 10. So I guess just what are you guys' thoughts on that? What stands out to you?
I know a lot of people were kind of upset that Alabama only went to 5. That was where I guessed they would drop, actually. I guessed 5 because you can't – after they lose, you can't have them still in the playoff position. But I think that they lost by 3 points against a team that – they had a streak of winning 100 games against unranked opponents in a row, which dropped. But it's kind of misleading because Texas A&M ain't your normal unranked team. Like, they were number 4 in the recruiting class last year and were ranked every week up until this one. And so it's not like they lost to ULM, who was the last unranked team they lost to. And they absolutely should have dropped, but I think a lot of people were kind of mad about them dropping only to 5. But I kind of I see why the committee only dropped them to 5 because, I mean, they're still I would still take them over a lot of teams, and I still think they're a better team than Oklahoma, even who's 4. You just can't drop Oklahoma after they're 6-0.
Yeah, I agree. I think 5 is a good spot for them, but I do see where people are coming from and saying that it's a little low because you look right below them, you've got Ohio State and Penn State, who both have decent. I mean, they've got the same record, but they've only lost top 10 teams. I mean, Penn State just lost to the number 3 team, now number 2 team in the country, and Ohio State's only losses to number 9 Oregon. So I understand where people are coming from in saying that they should have dropped further, but at the same time, the only way they would have dropped any further is maybe Ohio State jumping them. But we still don't really know what to think about Oregon yet because we haven't seen them play since that loss to Stanford.
Yeah, I don't know. Oregon is like weird because they were the Pac-12's like hope of making the playoffs this year, and then Pac-12 kind of cannibalized itself again, like it does every time.
Every time.
But yeah, I mean, I could totally like I wouldn't have been upset if Ohio State was 5. And like Penn State, yeah, they only lost to a top 10 team, but there's no way the number 1 team and the number 4 team both lose, and then the number 1 team ends up lower than them.
I agree with that.
So
that's why I said it. The only place they could have dropped further is to 6. I mean, it just wouldn't make sense for them to drop any further than that.
But Joe and I both had the hot take. I know that Iowa and Oklahoma are both in prime spots to make the playoffs, and we both have the hot take that neither of them will be in the playoffs by the time like it's all said and done.
So I don't know. I'm starting to read. I was kind of on board with that too. Iowa, I still agree, but their schedule is really soft from here on out. So, but I do
they're
think
a soft team.
I do think they'll end up losing the Big Ten championship, so it won't matter.
I think the word losing is an understatement.
Yeah, they'll probably get their ass whooped if we're being honest, but we got a while until then. Until then, though, I was probably going to sit up there at 2. I don't see any way that changes unless they somehow drop a game to somebody they shouldn't or start winning very, very close games. But other than that, I think they're pretty much solidified at 2 unless something crazy happens. The other thing is, I mean, Penn State probably should have won that game. I know y'all think the same thing, but I know Joe does for sure. But I mean, shit happens. You can't really. It's part of the game. Injuries are part of the game. I mean, you could say the same thing about A&M. A&M dropped 2 losses, but then beat Bama. What would A&M look like if they still had Haynes King? I mean, every team could say that if they really wanted to. Injuries happen, and there's not really. It's part of it.
I will say, I know, Joe, you have a big thing coming about Penn State, so I'll be quick. But I just want to say, and I've been meaning to say this for a week. Like on Twitter afterwards, I was kind of giving you a hard time because you were saying something about.
I was so pissed.
I know.
Not at you, but just in general. And that tweet was like
Iowa's overrated, and I said, well, Penn State's overrated if they lost to them. But I was gonna say I've been meaning to say this all week. After watching the game, I'm 100% convinced that Penn State is a better team. They just lost. Like after it, watching it, I'm like, okay, Iowa's offense is not going to do anything against any sort of like. I mean, they put up 23 points, I think, or something like that, barely.
Yeah, it was 23-20, and just the narrative of that game completely changed when Clifford went down because during the game they weren't really talking much about Iowa's defense. I mean, Penn State had a 7-3 lead, and then that backup quarterback came in who, for whatever reason, couldn't even complete a 10-yard pass. And then it was like sitting there, I was going insane listening to Gus Johnson talk about this Iowa Hawkeye defense. Just driving me up the wall. For people who don't know, I know this is a bit of a hot take. I hate Gus Johnson. Like I'm all for having passion when you're calling games, but there's a line to draw, and I think he goes way over the top with the stuff that he does.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yes.
Just without knowing like a lot of college announcers by name, is he the one that goes Iowa first down like every time, like enunciates every word? Okay. Mm-hmm. It does kind of drive me crazy too. I'm not gonna lie.
And last year it was Ohio State's running back. It was Master Teague for 40 yards, and it's just like I'm sitting there going, please. And it's always the Big Ten games too that he calls because they're on Fox with Joel Klatt. And I guess it's an upgrade over Beth Mowins, but man, the fact that as a Penn State fan, I've had to listen to them, like Beth Mowins and Gus Johnson year after year. It's been tough. It's been real tough for me. But yeah, the game, I'm obviously have had a lot of time to cool off, but very frustrated because we talked about it on last week's, episode about how if the game was being played in a neutral site, Penn State would blow them out. But unfortunately, it was being played in Iowa, and the fact that somebody said they'd rather listen to dog farts than Beth Owens. I don't even know who that is. I really do not know who that is. They followed me on Twitch like a couple of days ago, so shout out to whoever that is. But that's just kind of the nature of how, you can't control the scheduling, and it's upsetting because Penn State, I think easily if Clifford had stayed into that game, they would have won. I mean, he had a rough first quarter. He had 2 interceptions, but it seemed like he was kind of just getting into his groove, and the offense was kind of, going fast, and he was playing well. And then he went down with the injury, and that just completely changed the tune of the game. But other than that, I do want to talk about the fact that Iowa fans were just being complete assholes about Penn State, saying that they were faking injuries. And I think Penn State head coach James Franklin said it best. He was like, we've never been a team to fake injuries, 1. And 2, why would it make sense for us to fake injuries when you're not a hurry-up offense? You're an offense that huddles. Like, it's not like, you're playing Oregon in their glory years with Marcus Mariota and they're, running the hurry-up offense. So it made no sense. And that just the whole everything, it was just a combination of the fact that Clifford went down. I had to listen to Gus freaking Johnson. And then they're panning to the crowd, and Iowa fans are just being absolute dickheads. And so that's all I'm going to say about the game. I could, rant about it for a whole nother hour. But yeah, I just think Penn State was a better team. Obviously, the writing's on the wall for them. If they're able to win out for whatever reason, beat Ohio State, which is tough. They have a tough schedule. They still have to play Michigan and Michigan State. And they end up in the Big Ten championship and Iowa sitting there. I think they win by a good amount. But obviously, there's a lot of work for them to do between now and then. And still haven't heard much about Clifford. So if he's healthy, I think they have a good chance at running the table. But if it's Taquan Robinson, I think there's no chance. They probably lose a couple more games, to be honest, with him at quarterback after the shit show performance he had this past weekend. Yeah, my rant is over.
If anything, I think, you never want to go down with an injury, but I think that the way that it happened, honestly, with the way that quarterback play has been going on in the college scene this year, I think this kind of helps Clifford's draft stock. I mean, I don't know how y'all feel about that, but it showed how much better that team is with him versus without. And I think we'll continue to see that if he continues to have to rehab this. And right now, there's no other quarterbacks that are standing out as the number 1 guy for the NFL next year. So there is a positive for Penn State fans to take out of this. I mean, at least it makes Clifford look better than he ever has before.
It stresses the importance of Sean Clifford for that football team.
Exactly. Because Jahan Dotson is the real deal. He's great and all, but if he doesn't have somebody that can throw it to him, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I don't know what the stat line was for that game, but I did not hear his name called once.
Yeah.
And he's like you said, he's a great receiver, but you have to have a solid quarterback to be able to throw the ball to him. And they just didn't have that once Clifford went down.
Actually, I think that's a pretty good stepping point, too, for another pretty high college recruit, Spencer Rattler, getting benched again. And Caleb Williams came out and looked really good. And so you have to wonder, I mean, I saw today too that Spencer Rattler had made close to $1 million on NIL deals or something like that already.
He better start investing.
Yeah, his stock is plummeting, man. But
it's kind of I was gonna say it's kind of like De'Aaron King, who got all those endorsements before the season, played horribly, and now he's out for the year. But he's got the money because of the NIL, deals that he was able to get. But
yeah, and I know, side note, I know some people will probably be upset about that, being oh, this player, isn't that good, and they're making all this money. But you think about how much money they were bringing to the university already. De'Aaron King, for example. I mean, before you saw that Miami wasn't that great this year, there was all the Heisman hype around De'Aaron King. How many people do you think wanted to go see games to watch De'Aaron King play? So I think they deserve some money for it. But man, that Texas Oklahoma game was so rough. I'll just come out and say, my record this week in our bet slip It was 1-3-1. I had a draw on one of them, which is that's fine. Not my best. This is my first ever week actually officially sports betting now. So
well, let's be real about
You
that
got to win
Texas game.
you got to win on the board though. That's the thing. Yeah, and let's talk about. Don't even get me started about this Texas game. That was the worst loss. There is absolutely no reason I should be sitting at 3-3 on my slip right now.
That backdoor cover,
was
man.
Absolute bullshit. But it fired me up more than anything. And most people are sitting here saying, "Oh, Caleb Williams is great. Caleb Williams is great. Oklahoma's bound for the playoffs now that they've got a quarterback." Here's the thing. I think all this did was show how bad Texas's defense really is. I mean, if you go back and look at the Arkansas game, this is the same Texas defense. They gave up 3 or 4 touchdowns to KJ Jefferson, who is mediocre at best.
Jamarcus Russell 2.0.
Yeah. If anything, all this shows is that
Dwayne Haskins.
Yeah, Dwayne Haskins. All this shows is that Texas is bad at defense. How do you blow that kind of lead and not even cover? That's the thing. It's I tweeted out, good teams win, great teams cover. Texas can't do fucking either. And that was piss poor. I really don't think – I mean, Caleb Williams made the throws, but he was making the throws that any quarterback should. That's the thing. Everybody's hyping up Caleb Williams, and yeah, I think he's good. He's definitely an upgrade from Rattler, but I think it just shows how bad Rattler really is. This is not a good Texas defense. We've seen that after the loss to Arkansas. I mean, I couldn't believe my eyes when I watched Oklahoma score that final touchdown. I mean, it was just a piss poor performance from the Texas defense. I don't know how you don't hang on to that lead, but I'm on the train of I just think Texas is not what we really thought they were on defense. I just don't think that Caleb Williams, and I could be wrong. I'll probably end up regretting this, but I think Caleb Williams is good. Don't get me wrong about that, but I just think all he had to do was do what any decent quarterback should. The receivers were open. All he had to do was hit them.
Yeah, and I mean, another aspect about that too that people aren't really talking about is okay, yes, sometimes backup players are better. Lincoln Riley has a pretty good track record with quarterbacks, and he started Spencer Rattler all these weeks for a reason, right? So whether it be maybe Spencer Rattler just practices better, or maybe Caleb Williams just had the game of his life. There was a reason Rattler was starting all this time, and so like you said, maybe he did look a lot better than Rattler did this week, but maybe he's not all that, and maybe it is just Texas being awful.
We'll have to wait and find out. I mean, I'm interested in seeing. I mean, it's obvious at this point, unless something happens to Caleb Williams. I mean, Rattler's going to transfer, and I do think he will be successful. I mean, he's got a chance to be successful wherever he goes. I don't think he's absolutely horrible, but he's got a lot to work on. That is for damn sure. But now he's got plenty of time to work on it. So,
yeah.
I mean, he's just going to have to work harder than he ever has. And I think this could be the motivating thing that turns him into the quarterback that he was supposed to be. But it was clear and obvious after this whole season, really, not just this Texas game, that Rattler is not, at the moment, is not the guy that everybody thought he was. I think he can get there. And this could be the thing that makes him get there, that makes him work to get there. But right now, he's not the guy.
I think it's tough too now because we all know what Oklahoma fans are going to be like. They're going to say, "Oh, well, now that Caleb Williams is our quarterback, that's why we almost lost all those games. That's why we've been playing so close. Now that Caleb Williams is our quarterback, we're a completely different team." And like you talked about, it's just not necessarily the case. And I think, yeah, Caleb Williams is a great athlete, but like you said, he was making the throws that Rattler should have been making, and he was just making it look easy. And there was nothing that he did that, really blew my mind. He played well, but he was making the throws and hitting the guys that Rattler should have been hitting. And I mean, as a quarterback, that's what you're supposed to do. But I think it's also about sample size. And it's not like Texas was preparing all week to play against Caleb Williams. They're preparing for Spencer Rattler. And I'm sure Rattler takes a good majority of the snaps in practice. And so now teams have film on Caleb Williams, and I don't know who they're playing this week. I think it's TCU. But TCU has a track record for usually having a solid defense coached by Gary Patterson. And so, I would not be all that shocked if, Williams comes out and maybe throws a couple picks against TCU this week.
I think that Caleb Williams, like I said, I think he's a good quarterback. I just don't think he's great enough to still lead this Oklahoma team to the playoffs. And I mean, once again, this is very early for me to be saying that. Like, I could be proven wrong this very next week, but there's just not enough. I just haven't seen enough yet. And maybe he'll prove me wrong this week. I mean, if so, that's great. I've got an Oklahoma future bet, so I'll take it. But I just haven't seen enough yet, and Texas is not the team to say, okay, this guy is it or this guy isn't. I mean, like I said, this is the same Texas team that gave up a ridiculous amount of yards and touchdowns to KJ Jefferson, who we're now seeing is not a good quarterback.
Yeah, and Joe, kind of like what you were saying, it reminds me a lot of our boy Kirk Cousins, where he gets all the flack, and when he plays well, everyone, yeah, exactly. Everyone goes like, "Oh, see, like the problem's fixed now. Oh, see, Spencer Rattler's benched, so now all our problems are fixed." Well, I don't know. Why wasn't Spencer Rattler out there stopping Tulane from scoring 35?
Yeah, Oklahoma has a lot more issues.
I mean, and like they've won all their games. I'll spoil it right now. I actually picked TCU to beat them this week, and so like just outright. And I know I picked Texas last week, and it looked so good for a while, and then came back to bite me.
It looked so good. We all had Texas.
We were red hot in that group chat talking about that game. We were sitting there. Texas was up by a bunch. We're like, man, this looks like a good bet. And then Oklahoma kind of gradually started scoring, and we were all like, oh shit. And then that backdoor cover where I was like, okay, whatever, they'll kick a field goal, win the game. But the fact that the Texas defense just shit the bed and couldn't tackle, I was so heated.
That
was just, the tip of the iceberg for that day of football. Little did I know at the time. But I don't know. You look at this, just to go back to the new AP rankings, you look at the top 5 teams, and I mean, I don't think Iowa or Oklahoma is all that great. I think we're going to go back and look at these rankings at the end of the year and go, man, were we off with that? I think a lot of the teams that are below them, have a better chance of making the playoffs and rising to the top than, the teams that are there right now, except for Cincinnati and Georgia. I think they'll be okay because Cincinnati's already beaten the teams they needed to beat. They haven't lost, and, the rest of their schedule for the year isn't, challenging at all, so they'll probably sit there. But I do have a question about Cincinnati. And my question is, so let's say Georgia and Alabama play in the SEC championship and Alabama wins. So you put in Georgia and you'd put in Alabama. And then let's say Ohio State wins out the rest of their games. They're in the playoffs. And so do you think there's a good chance that Cincinnati gets screwed over again?
No, I think you would drop Iowa in that case.
They're not.
I know you would drop.
They're only going to take one Big Ten team. If there's a one-loss Big Ten team, they're getting in. I think that Cincinnati at this point makes it over a one-loss Oregon team. I think Cincinnati makes it over another one-loss Big Ten team. I think the only way that the only team that's coming out of the Big Ten is going to be whoever wins that championship, and they've got to either be undefeated or have one loss that is to another very good team.
Well, but I was just going to say, here's the question. If Oregon wins out, they win the Pac-12, their win over Ohio State, who would be a playoff team, looks a whole lot better in strength of schedule than Cincinnati's does.
I mean,
it's a tough debate to have, but it's going to happen.
As much as you like Oregon, the Pac-12 it's not as impressive winning the Pac-12 as it is winning the Big Ten or the SEC.
And Stanford is bad. I mean, Stanford is bad.
So, for the Big Ten, for example, whoever wins is most likely right now, it's either going to be Iowa or Ohio State. And those two teams beating each other is a lot more impressive than Oregon beating whoever they're going to play in the Pac-12 championship, in my opinion.
But Oregon's the only Cincinnati one played?
Notre Dame. was top 10 like the entire year.
I don't know.
Notre Dame all
I
that
agree.
great?
Here's the thing. Here's the thing with Cincinnati is they not only have they I think that it's going to go back to what they did last year. You know, the committee is supposed to be focused on this year only, but we obviously see that's not true whenever they're putting teams like Alabama, like Ohio State, like Clemson. Whenever these teams have one loss, it doesn't matter. And you can't yeah, you can tell those are the better teams, but you can't tell me that it's not somewhat based off of the history they've had the last few years, the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And yeah, Cincinnati doesn't have a track record going that far back, but Cincinnati has proven themselves enough over the last 3-4 years to where if they went out this year and they went out in a commanding way, which just to mention, a lot of people, including myself, I refused to bet on Cincinnati this past week because I was a little worried about them having a down game after the big win, but 52-3 to a team against Temple. And Temple is a bad team, but Temple just won a big game against Memphis a week before. So, I mean, Temple is capable of beating other decent AAC teams, but Cincinnati did not care. They ran up the score and won by 49 points. I just think that Cincinnati has too good of a track record right now to where if they went out, they're in. Because the other thing is, you say they're not really playing anybody the rest of the year. They still have an undefeated SMU team on their schedule. They still have a one-loss Houston team on their schedule. Yeah, are these teams comparable to SEC one-loss and undefeated teams? No, but there's almost no undefeated teams left in the country. So for SMU to be able to do that at all is impressive, and you can't deny that.
Okay, so we have it on our Google Doc. Who are your 4 teams? Who are your 4 playoff teams right now?
If we are we saying okay, how are we doing this now? Are we doing this as
it's just based off of what you think is going to happen?
If the season ended today, or
no.
Happen?
What we think is going to happen going forward.
Okay. I mean, who wants to start? I'm gonna need a snack.
All right, I will. All right, this might get a lot of hate. I'm going Alabama, Georgia. Like I think Alabama wins out and beats Georgia. I really do. I mean, it's kind of a hot take because they're just off the heels of a loss. But Nick Saban's won 6 national championships at Alabama. Only 2 of them has he ever gone undefeated. Yeah, he has glaring holes, and I could be completely wrong, right? Like I said, they were going to beat Texas A&M. Obviously, I'm not right, and I do have my rose-colored glasses. But I think that they have a more solid chance against beating Georgia than people are giving them credit for. Picking those 2 SEC teams. I think Ohio State runs the table from here on out and makes it in over Iowa. And I think Cincinnati wins out, and you got to give it to them. And I was going to say, Cincinnati also has to send a big thank you note to 2017 UCF. Because if they didn't go undefeated that year and have such a big stink about how, we should have got our chance, blah, 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 I don't think Cincinnati would be in the conversation because people are going.
Yeah, they have Auburn to thank too for absolutely shitting the bed against UCF in that bowl game that year.
Yeah.
Oh, and that was so miserable to watch.
I think because of the 27 UCF team where they have a claim on the national championship and had such a big stink that they didn't even get a chance to play for it, I think that the committee's not going to make the mistake of leaving an undefeated team out like that again.
You guys think the committee is going to feel bad and, put Cincinnati in? I just don't think that's necessarily the case, even if they've been good in years past. And you talk about the UCF team and how they were a national champion, self-proclaimed. I don't think that's the case. I really still think it doesn't matter.
Well, here's the thing. I think it all still does. Now, I will agree with you on this. I think it still does depend on how Notre Dame finishes the season out. Now, if Notre Dame ends up being a 4-5 loss team, I'm gonna jump ship.
They almost lost to Tech this week.
I don't know that Cincinnati's getting in at that point. It was at Tech though. You always got to remember that. That's a tough place to play, and that's not a bad team over there either. But if Notre Dame stays a 1 or even 2 loss team, SMU stays undefeated until they play Cincinnati. You can't tell me that a Cincinnati team that beats 2 1-loss teams is not getting in. That there's just no way. My 4, Cincinnati's in control of their own destiny, in my opinion. Well, somewhat, but it does depend on Notre Dame and SMU. But I think SMU is going to stay undefeated until then, and I think Notre Dame's going to be at least decent. So I would say my 4 is Georgia. I don't think Georgia's losing a game until maybe the SEC championship. So Georgia. I think Cincinnati's going to win out. I mean, I don't know. SMU could give them a run for their money, though.
I'm not high on Cincinnati. I'm not like your marquee win is against Notre Dame, who struggled against everybody
Yeah.
this year. We want to talk about Oklahoma.
I'm not saying Cincinnati's not going to get absolutely murdered in the playoffs if they make it. Now, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that they have better odds right now to make it than a lot of other teams. Like I just don't see they're in a better situation than most teams in the country.
Ooh,
And
real
so
quick.
I mean, my four would have to be Georgia, Cincinnati.
Cincinnati at 2?
No. I wasn't going in order.
I was like, go in order. I want to hear like
in order. Oh gosh.
Yeah. All right, just say your 4. I won't.
I'm gonna say that's gonna take too much because I haven't decided what I think about Georgia Bama SEC championship.
Yeah, you said you had a hot take on that Alabama, so I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yeah, well, and I'm not 100% bought in. I'm just saying it needs there's some things that need to be mentioned. There's some things that need to be talked about that nobody's talking about. I've got Georgia. I just don't think Georgia's losing the game this year. I got them 1 either way. I honestly, as of right now, I probably would put. I don't know. This is so tough right now because if Oklahoma wins out, then they're in. All right, I just gotta forget about. I gotta forget about the ifs because if Oklahoma wins out, they'll have a good Oklahoma State team on their resume. They'll have a decent Texas team, all that. But I just got to throw out the ifs. I'm gonna say what I think is gonna happen. It's gonna be Georgia, Cincinnati, Oklahoma, and either Ohio State or Penn State.
If you want, okay, real quick, I've been dying to say this, right? But if you want to maximize chaos, this week is actually the week that I think the most chaos can be done, right? Georgia loses to Kentucky. Kentucky gets the head-to-head over them and plays in the SEC championship. And then if Bama beats Kentucky, you have to put SEC winning Bama. But then the winner of the Big Ten, and then if Cincinnati wins out or the Oklahoma wins out, then where do you put Georgia, right? Because they didn't. It's like 2017 all over again, where Alabama made the playoffs at 4, but they didn't even play in their championship game because they lost to Auburn the week before.
And that's where
totally happened this year if Kentucky wins.
That's where
Saturday.
With all the chaos that's happened so far, I wouldn't be surprised if just absolutely more chaos ensues. And that's why, I look at Cincinnati and I'm like, well, they're in control of their own destiny to a certain degree. But if chaos breaks out with all these other teams, they could get screwed out of making the playoffs just from, something that's not even their fault.
You want to know what I really think might happen? I mean, I went with the safe picks in my opinion. I really think we could see. I think we could see a 2-loss team in the playoffs. I think with the amount of chaos that's going on right now, I don't think it's going to stop. And this is where I've been wanting to talk about too with this whole NIL thing. I don't think people realize the impact that this was going to have immediately. But you got to think now when it comes to recruiting, it's going to take a little bit of time for the NIL to really make an impact because there's a whole nother topic that we can talk about another time. But I think teams, and I've been talking with a bunch of buddies about this, I think teams with big markets like UCLA, like Texas, like these teams that haven't been good in a while, that are in good locations, that have big donors, I think they're going to end up becoming a lot better. But that's a whole nother topic. I don't think people were expecting the effects on play. But you've got to think, you're taking these kids that are coming out of high school. A lot of them came from absolutely nothing. They're still getting all the same benefits they had before. Everything's paid for. They're all given cars. We all know that in one way or another.
It's been happening too.
Yeah, but however they get them, who knows? But they're getting vehicles. They're getting their food, complimentary food, complimentary housing. Everything is paid for. They can walk in any bar or restaurant and get whatever drinks or food they want for free. Everything in their life is already free. And throw 6 figures on top of that. And you're talking about some of these guys that might have been on food stamps growing up. These kids are coming from nothing, and then they're getting over 6 figures into their bank accounts immediately. you're going to see some effects in play because that's a lot of money. And they have a lot. Like, I don't think the coaches were expecting the impact it was going to have. And here's the thing. I don't think it's going to continue to have as much of an impact. But in my opinion, that is what the craziness of this year is coming from, is that these coaches and these players, there was no precedent. Nobody knew how much these kids were going to be making. So, like, nobody expected, I didn't expect 7-figure deals. Like, I did not think there was any chance anybody broke 7 figures, and I don't know that they did either. And now that they have that money, I don't know that they really know how to act with it, especially when they already still have everything paid for. That is 7 figures of straight spending money. Like, imagine that in your time in college. How would you act? You think you would be quite as dedicated? Like, I know it's not the end, like they're still looking to make it to the NFL, but you can't tell me that if you were given that, you wouldn't get a little distracted for the first little bit because it was so unexpected.
I would 100% argue though that just becomes another like issue that the coaches have to deal with, right? Like good coaches would know how to handle their players like that, and the bad ones will
I
struggle
think they
even more.
will, and that's what I was saying. I think they will. I don't think this is going to be a continuing issue. I just think that this came so quickly. Like, you got to think like this. Most of these deals were happening right before the season. Like, this isn't something they knew they were getting months ago. This was happening while they were prepping for the season. And like, I just don't think anybody, or at least I sure as hell didn't expect some of the numbers in these deals. And like, I think it's affecting the play, and I do think coaches will adjust. I think they'll adjust even during this season. But I think that, in my opinion, that's what the craziness of this year is attributed to.
Yeah,
I was just gonna say I definitely agree with that. It's definitely gonna continue to get even crazier too. Like, it's not gonna change at all. It's just gonna continue getting crazier. This is only the first year of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think? I mean, with what you were saying, do you think that could also be kind of a red flag in, like, when it comes to their NFL stock, right? Like someone like Spencer Rattler, if that is the issue that he's made like $1 million almost and like on endorsements and kind of stopped caring about football. Like, what do you think will happen once he sees his first NFL check? Like, he was in talks for the #1 pick. Like, without looking it up, Trevor Lawrence made like $40 million or something on his #1 overall pick rookie contract. So.
Yeah. And I don't think, like I said, I think that good players and good coaches both will adjust even as early as, the next 2-3 weeks. But I don't know that everybody will. And I think there's going to continue to be chaos because there's another thing I've been talking about all week that, there's been a lot of chaos in the rankings, but even outside the rankings, these games are wild. I mean, all these games, there are so many games, good games from all over the board. Like, it's insane. And I think there's just a little bit of an adjustment for these really good players on these really good teams, and these other players on these not as great teams, not making as much money, still have the same drive that they always had, when some of these better players, better recruits, might not have the same exact drive yet. Now, like I said, I do think they will take care of it. The good ones the bad ones will be weeded out. The ones that aren't going to take it seriously for good. But I think there's going to be an adjustment period, and that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. All right. So we should talk about, we've talked a lot about Spencer Rattler today. Yeah. Where do you guys think like the Heisman votes stand right now? Because it's kind of literally no one who was on the like opening list is still on it. Like, maybe Bryce Young is in the discussion right now, but he's not. I don't know if he's the front runner anymore.
We still got to talk about that game too.
Yeah,
he is the front runner right now, according to the odds.
Like, people like Matt Corral, but he played Alabama and didn't look great. Like, running backs are kind of an uphill battle in today's day and age, just because you have to be super dominant to, like, I don't know. So, I mean, who do you guys think of, like, who's your bet right now?
I think if I had a bet, I would just still go with Bryce Young, just because the fact that we saw Corral struggle against Alabama, and obviously he's putting up all these stats against Arkansas and all these other teams. And this isn't a knock on Matt Corral. I think he's a good quarterback. I don't know if he's necessarily a Heisman winning quarterback. I think the chances of Bryce Young running the table and just being sound the rest of the year are a lot higher than Matt Corral, because there was a gap between the two, but after this week it's become a lot more even. But I still think it's Bryce Young's Heisman race to lose.
Maybe a little bit of a hot take, but I kind of think that this last week hurt Matt Corral, because I mean he put up good stats, right? But you look at what Texas A&M's backup was able to do to Alabama's defense, and then Matt Corral went out there.
That's true.
And
That's a good
struggled as
point.
hard as he did. I mean, yes, I know the voters only look at like stats a lot of the times, and they're not going to be like, oh, well, we kind of struggle. But like Texas A&M's backup went out there and played a super efficient game, and so I mean, yeah, everyone has one bad game, right? But one bad game can lose you the Heisman, right? Like Mac Jones
100%.
was favored for a lot of time last year, and then he played Arkansas and had like no touchdowns and 150 yards. And Alabama won like 50-3 or something, but he had one bad game and basically dropped out of the race. Finished fourth, I think, in the vote, third or fourth. Trevor Lawrence got a lot of legacy votes, I will say. He definitely didn't deserve to get second, but
Yeah, no, he didn't deserve that last year. If I had to pick a favorite right now, if we're going off of what's happened so far this season, I think Kenneth Walker at Michigan State's a lock. I mean, an undefeated team leading the country in rushing yards. I mean, if it ended today, that would be my pick. But I don't think he's going to – I think he'll keep his production up, but I don't think Michigan State is going to be a good enough team for him to win it. I would start looking – I really don't even know what to say, because I haven't decided fully. I'm waiting until after this Mississippi State game to decide about what I think about Bama. So, because I haven't seen anything from Bryce Young on the road yet. That's my biggest thing so far is like, and when I said on Twitter earlier, does Alabama have do they have holes in their game where they've been exposed and will continue to get exposed? I think that exposure comes with Bryce Young on the road. I mean, he's going to have a tough challenge against Mississippi State at Mississippi State, and there were simply in the A&M game, there were just throws he was missing. It's not like he didn't have open receivers. Now, looking back, I know Texas A&M was kind of running a strange defense, but I mean, he still had open receivers that he just simply wasn't hitting, and the ones that he was hitting, they would be low or they would be high or they would be too far out to where they'd have to dive. And Alabama doesn't have that standout receiver that they usually have. Mechie's good, but I don't think Mechie is at the same level of Devontae or Waddle or any of those guys yet. I think Mechie will get there, but I don't think he's there yet. So Bryce has to step up and help them get there.
yeah.
I think the thing we have to remember about Bryce Young too is that he's only a sophomore. And you kind of have to take the whole sophomore label with a grain of salt, because last year as a freshman, obviously completely unprecedented times. We had COVID going on, and so it was kind of a steeper learning curve for a freshman quarterback, even at Alabama with all the tools at his disposal. And so I think that Bryce Young is a great quarterback, and he's shown flashes, but there are going to be those growing pains. And, as tough as a pill as that is to swallow for Alabama fans, I think he has, we saw it last week against Texas A&M. We saw it at Florida. He tends to struggle a little bit on the road. Not all of that is his fault, but, he has been a little bit streaky on the road. And at home, he's been very good. But a lot of those home games, are against like the cupcake teams that we like to call them. But, kind of going back to the whole Heisman thing, I think one thing that hasn't been talked about is the fact that, if you're a playoff team, the chances of you having a player win the Heisman, I think, are a lot higher. Obviously, with Kenneth Walker, he's had a great year, but I don't want to say never or it's not going to happen. But Michigan State's not going to make the playoffs. So, like you said, he'll continue having great numbers. But if the team is, a non-factor, then it's just like it's not going to happen. That's why I think Bryce Young, the chances of him winning are pretty high, because the chances of Alabama running the table are high as well. I mean, CJ Stroud could creep back in there too because of Ohio State and how good they are.
Yeah, they've looked really good recently. And same thing with Bijan Robinson. I mean, Bijan Robinson is the real deal, but I just don't think Texas is good enough to give Bijan Robinson a chance to win that award.
Who was the last Heisman winner that wasn't on a playoff team? Like, has there been
Lamar,
one
maybe?
since the college football playoff era? I guess Lamar, yeah.
Yeah, Lamar. It was Lamar.
Lamar was pre-playoffs, though, wasn't he? No, he was.
No, he was.
I thought that was like 14, 15?
I don't know. I don't have all the Heisman. So if we
either.
had to look at it, last year was Devontae. The year before it was Burrow, right?
Oh, he won the Heisman in 2016, and I think the college football playoffs were definitely around by then.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
In what, 15?
So I guess Lamar would be the first. Yeah, because it was. I mean, Burrow 2 years ago, like Devontae, and then it was Kyler Murray, and then it was Baker.
Mm-hmm.
So then,
yeah, and every one of those has been from a playoff team, and as much as it sucks, like that's just kind of how it is, really.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I said about Kenneth Walker. I don't think Michigan State will be a good enough team to keep him in the race. But if it was based solely off of players' abilities or stats, then it would be Kenneth Walker. But I don't think that's going to happen.
What an absolute steal, by the way, right, from the transfer portal. Like, I mean, there's been a couple transfers this year that have just been super good, but he's been, I think, pretty head and shoulders above everyone else. As like,
where do they get him from?
Missouri, right? Or Wake Forest?
I thought it was Wake Forest.
I mean, you probably are right. I thought it was Missouri.
I don't know off the top of my head. Usually I'm pretty good with the transfers, but I do want to say that if we're talking about transfers, and you said Alabama doesn't really have that guy at receiver, you have not watched much of Jamison Williams for them because he's been very good.
Yeah, no, he has been good. I'm saying though, he's not on the same level to where you know what I mean. I was saying that they don't have that Devontae or Waddle guy, and because those two guys would go up and catch whatever the hell kind of throw if it was anywhere close, But I don't think that Mechie or Williams, I think they're good. Don't get me wrong, and I think they will be great. I think Mechie could be a Heisman contender next year possibly, but I just don't think they're there yet. And Bryce has not made the throws that I feel like he should be expected to make on the road at least. Now, and that's what I'm saying. It's completely different on the road. He played. I've watched every single Bama game, and he plays completely different on the road.
It was Wake Forest, by the way. You were right. But, I mean, Bryce missed a lot of throws. And, like, I know my parents, for example, watching the game with them, Mac Jones kind of spoiled a lot of fans. Like, he would not miss any throw that wasn't, like, blanketed last year. He was just on a different plane. But Bryce Young will miss a throw here and there. This last week, too, though, I noticed, like, a lot of drops. I know, like, Billingsley had at least 2. Mechie had 2. And, like, they were like game-losing potential drops because, like, I think 2 of them were on the last drive before Alabama punted and then like blew the lead and lost. And like, you just can't have that. And it's also kind of like Patrick. Like, okay, this is gonna sound like a huge comparison. I was gonna say like Patrick Mahomes. Obviously,
no, I was about to say, do not. No. Do not go all full Bammer on us right now.
No. This isn't Bammer at all. I'm not saying like Bryce Young is anywhere near Patrick Mahomes level. I was saying his offensive line is like Patrick Mahomes is this year, where Alabama's had a historically dominant offensive line. And then this year they're struggling. And so teams are able to get pressure with 3 or 4 rushers every play and drop 7, 8 guys back into coverage, and Bryce Young's still got to run for his life every play. And so
I can agree with that. I thought you were about to go full Bammer and compare Bryce Young to Patrick Mahomes.
No, I was comparing his lines. I'm not that much of a homer. Come on. I try to keep my takes grounded.
Oh, goodness gracious. But yeah, no, I can agree with that 100%.
So
I guess I was just going to say the last point we have on here, if we wanted to talk about the basically fields being stormed.
Yeah.
And not to keep going back to the Penn State game, but I did find it a little bit odd that the home team, number 3 ranked team, stormed the field against the number 4 ranked team. But also, Iowa as a football school, they don't have a lot of top 5 wins. So it's kind of understandable, even though they shouldn't have won that game. But I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on the fields being stormed? Because this is not the first time we've seen this year, obviously.
I mean, I even look at UMass stormed the field after beating UConn this past week.
Yeah, unbeaten.
Yeah, so, but I'm all in on it. I love the idea of storming the fields, especially for these teams like this. You got to think we've been in lockdown for a year to 2 years almost in some places. These people deserve it. I mean, if you're coming in and you're beating a team like that, especially when you're a team that historically is good but never wins the big game, and you do that, I would have deserved it. I mean, I know I understand why Penn State fans will be upset. Like it makes sense, but you've got to combine the fact like I was historically been a very good team, but always loses that game, loses those types of games, and on top of that, we've been in lockdown. Like everybody's ready to get back to normal, and I feel like the storming the fields throughout the entire country, even UMass, is just making it feel a lot more normal, finally.
Yeah, it's kind of like a middle finger to COVID after the year that we've all had. It's been
Exactly.
tough. Obviously, COVID's still going on, but it is nice to see that, full capacity and fans being able to storm the field. I do like seeing that. I never have a problem with that. And A&M did it against Alabama, and yeah, I don't blame them.
Well, I was about to say
that one was more
unranked
made
team
more
being the
sense.
number one team in there. But I think you can. I 100% get why fans do it, and it's super exciting. But I think you can also, kind of like you were saying, Fagan, like tell which teams historically aren't super successful based on, like, you don't see a Clemson, you don't see an Ohio State, you don't see an Alabama storming the field after their wins, even if they're big wins, because it's to them like it's business as usual, right? So I think you can tell, like, even though Iowa's number 2. The last national championship they won, I had to look it up, was 1960. They have a claimed national championship from them. So like, it's like super exciting and a super big deal for all those students because they're not like a football powerhouse per se. And I get why they do it, but also, like I said, you can kind of tell like which programs aren't historically like super successful based on people that do it every week. I don't know. I do like the ADs like eating the fine for it though, and just saying like go for it.
It's
and I
pocket
think, like I
change for
said,
those
I
guys.
think combined with the whole lockdown thing, I think this year is kind of an anomaly with this. Like if this continues and people continue to do it, it's going to start to get old. It won't have the same meaning that it used to, and that's when I'll have an issue. But for now, I love it.
Yeah, I kind of like it. Like it's kind of like LSU playing neck every week, where they get fined for it, but they just keep saying like, just keep doing it. Like you guys deserve it,
Let the band play neck.
I mean, now the AD just tells their band director to play it whenever they want, and he basically okayed them to eat the fine every time they want to play it. So. I think Alabama probably gets fined for playing Dixieland Delight. They try to pump in crowd noise, but you can still hear it.
Yeah, I thought that was the funniest thing ever. You can still hear it like on the TV because the students are so determined to just still keep saying it, even if the AD is like, no, you guys can't say that. They're like, oh, we're still gonna do it regardless.
It's like a wink. You can't say it.
Yeah, and I don't even really think the AD cares that much about it.
That's what I'm saying. He's kind of winking like, oh, y'all can't do this, but then he doesn't actually care. He's just forced to say that.
He's not going to promote it, but at the same time, he's like kind of just not going to strictly enforce it all that much.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I was just going to say now we can kind of dive into the games.
Yeah.
And
let's move into it. Let's move into the money
An hour
making.
later.
Yeah. Well, that was a lot to happen. Last week was wild.
Exciting.
So, and not a lot going on this next week, so probably won't take as much time talking about next week's games as we did last time.
3 hours later.
Yeah, so number 5 now, Alabama, 20-point favorite over Mississippi State. We have on here like, is this going to be a bounce back game for Crimson Tide? And I kind of like loosely follow Nick Saban interviews, right? Because he's not the type of guy that beats around the bush. He said the players have responded well to the loss, which means that they're going to go out and win by like 50 points.
Shit, I Nick Saban hope so.
And it's expected, obviously, they're 20-point favorites. And yeah, like they were 18-point favorites this last week. So that is a big question mark. It's
actually a lot closer. Last week started at 17.5. This week started at 17. I think actually in Vegas it is still 17. I think on our book it's just 20 when I looked earlier. But
I would be
very
shocked.
Similar line.
I would be shocked if Nick Saban let a second like unranked team be anywhere close to his team 2
If
weeks
that's
in a
the
row.
case, then I don't even want to be in the playoffs. Like,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like if you don't go out there,
you're not gonna get the chance.
Well, like I mean, even if
what
it's
do
a
you mean
close
you
game,
don't want to be? Oh
if it's
my
a
gosh,
close,
I
if
can't
it's
believe
a
you just
close
said that.
game
It
and we
doesn't
win
matter.
somehow.
No. Okay. I was about to say. I thought you meant if
not
y'all
losing
lost. I
outright,
don't
but
want to
like
be in the
No, if we
playoffs if we
lose,
lose. I was like, you're not gonna get the chance to be in the playoffs if you lose.
yeah, the committee keeps Alabama out, and Joe's like, I didn't even want to be in the playoffs. It's
yeah,
fine.
that's what
I didn't want to be in anyways.
I'll let y'all talk about this.
Okay,
first.
yeah. So then one last thing about it. I mean, there's not a lot to talk about. On paper, it should be a stomp, right? But on paper, I guess A&M was supposed to be a stomp. They had a backup quarterback, blah, blah, blah. That's sad, and I'm drinking Jack Daniels now to forget it. Pete Golding gets a lot of criticism, and rightfully so. Like, people go, he can't be out there and make the plays, make the tackles.
I criticize Pete
People
Golding.
argue. Yeah, exactly. Well, people, like I said, argue, he can't be out there. He can't make the tackles. You know what position group has struggled the most this year? Inside linebackers. You know what position coach, like he specifically coaches inside linebackers. So, and then Bill O'Brien, I think, may have lost Alabama the game this last week. They had 2 red zone trips in a row where they dialed up 3 pass plays for 3 incompletions and then kicked a field goal. Literally, the Alabama's bread and butter all year, the one thing that other teams couldn't stop was handing it to Brian Robinson at the 1 yard line, and then he would just walk in. They didn't even attempt it. He had an insane
stat line that game too.
Yeah, and they didn't even give it a chance. Like,
he rushed 147. He rushed for 147.
Yeah, and like even if your offensive line has kind of been getting manhandled by A&M's like defensive line, Brian Robinson this year historically, I don't think I've seen, like 6 games in, I don't think I've seen him get tackled by the first guy that's got to him the entire year. At the goal line, literally at least once per those 2 possessions, you should have tried to give it to him and let him try to power through. So I just don't understand how, especially after the first drive where they like went 3 incomplete passes and had to kick a field goal. He was like, that was fine. We'll do it again. And lo and behold, they could have scored 4 extra points. They lost by 3. So
I'm just going to be honest. If this team doesn't win a national championship or doesn't play for a national championship, it'll be because of Bill O'Brien. Because this team has an insane amount of talent. So talent is not in the question. It's just coaching. And Nick Saban's a great coach. And kind of backtracking a little bit with Pete Golding, he's never been a great defensive coordinator. It's just been the fact that we've been bailed out by having, last year we had Sarkisian. He was a great offensive coordinator. So it's like the defense sucks, but the offense is really good. This year, the defense and the offense are both in the same boat where they're, kind of hindered by who's calling the plays for them. Bill O'Brien is a horrible play caller. I mean, you talked about it. Brian Robinson's been running the ball well all year, ran the ball well last week in the A&M game, and they still refuse to hand him the ball on the goal line. So that's the only thing that makes me nervous about Alabama this year. It makes me think that they're not going to win a national championship is just the fact they have Bill O'Brien calling plays for the offense and Pete Golding on defense, which sucks to say because there is so much talent. And you don't want your coordinators to dictate how the game goes, but that's how it's been this year. In the Florida game, it was the same way.
Yeah, and about Pete Golding too, like for the first year or 2, right, like I thought people were being too hard on him, and I multiple times made the argument like it's an offensive league, like it's just going to happen. Sometimes offenses are going to outscore your defense. But after watching Georgia play this year, I don't know if that's true. Like I think Georgia's showing that you can be a defensive first team and still blow other teams out, right? Like Georgia's offense, they're undefeated and the number 1 team in the country. Their offense is not that inspiring, but their defense is just so good that other teams can't score points against them. And so it's just, you can be a good defensive team. And now I'm more understanding just how bad Pete Golding is with all the talent he has and giving up. Yeah.
I think a lot of people are too. There's the people like me that have never liked Pete Golding and have had to fight off that argument of, he calls the defense and players make the plays. The point that you just brought up, it's an offensive league. But now we're seeing that, okay, that's not necessarily the case and that Pete Golding's actually just not a good defensive coordinator outright.
So I'm on the same page with y'all. I'm not as motivated about this as y'all are, but I do agree. I think that Pete Golding is the other hole that I was talking about because the Alabama defense, everybody was caught up. Here's my thing. I think in that A&M game, I think the storyline got a little twisted with Manziel being there. I think the fact that Manziel was on the screen so much after every Calzada throw, started to make people literally started making up the plays that Calzada was making. It goes back to the same thing with Rattler and Caleb Williams. Calzada was not making any throws that every quarterback should make those throws. It's not like he was going out there running around like Manziel used to, just tossing it up and making some insane play. He wasn't doing that. He was making routine throws that any quarterback should. The receivers were just wide open. Wide open.
Yeah.
I mean, and he threaded the needle a few times, but you expect your quarterback to. If you're playing as a starter in the SEC, you've got to be able to make those throws. And he did that. He didn't do anything more than that, in my opinion. He just did his job. And it just took him some time, coming as a backup. It was surprising, don't get me wrong, but he just played like an SEC quarterback should. The Alabama defense just had holes because of the play calling. The talent's there. It makes no sense how people were so open. The talent is completely there. It was all the play calling. I mean, they were just open receivers. And the other thing is with Bill O'Brien, whenever you're doing that, how do you not give in the red zone, how do you not give somebody that has rushed for 147 yards the ball? That makes no sense. And that goes back to me saying that Bryce Young not doing well under pressure. I think he's not doing well under pressure because they're putting so much pressure on him in these away games. I pulled up, let me see if I can find it. Bryce Young threw 48 passes in that game. Yeah. That is not a normal Alabama quarterback amount. You're telling me a sophomore Alabama quarterback is throwing 50 passes? That's not normal. And I know they were down, but when you've got a running back that's averaging 6 yards a carry, rushing for 147 yards, it doesn't matter if you're down. You score the ball the way you know how. I was just so confused by that the whole game. And I'm not saying that Bryce Young is not great. I think he's good. He does miss some open throws, but a lot of it's the play calling. I mean, it just didn't make sense. They're asking him to do too much. And whenever you ask somebody to throw 48 passes, they're going to miss passes. Like I said earlier, Bryce Young had open receivers that he was missing, but when you throw 48 passes in a game against a decent rush, you're going to miss passes. There's no way you don't. I don't know. I think that the coaching is a big hole in Alabama's game. And I'm honestly really interested in seeing what happens this week because Mississippi State is not the biggest stadium, but damn are them cowbells annoying. And I'm interested in seeing how the play calling and everything works with that. And because if they ask Bryce to do as much, throw 50 passes in that, I don't know. I mean, I know y'all probably trust him a little bit more than I do. I think he'll be great. I just don't know if he's there yet.
No, I mean, it sucks. We're all on the same page here. We're not talking about players on the defense or players on the offense that aren't playing well. It really sucks ass that we have to talk about coaches that are making that big of a difference, that are bringing this team down to keeping it from achieving its level, which is a national championship. This is a national championship team. Yeah. I keep saying it. They have all the talent in the world. But if you have horrible coaches, it's going to bring you down.
Yeah. And I still also think, too, a little bit of the NIL is playing a factor here, too, because them Alabama boys are getting paid like no other.
Yeah,
I don't necessarily agree with that, but
I mean, I don't know. That's hard to know unless you go and sit at the practices. I know it's kind of like a tough take to say, but I do think it does definitely play a factor when you're Bryce Young, 19, 20-year-old guy that's literally already got over $1 million. And you've seen the same thing with Rattler. These guys were expected to be the best in the country, got over $1 million in endorsements. It's kind of tough to focus when you have that much pressure on you. And especially when you weren't expecting it last year. Last year was not like that because you didn't. Now that you're getting paid, people are going to expect even more. And I don't know that he was ready for that. I think that Bryce is going to be a great quarterback, but I don't know if he was ready for the immense pressure that has come from that.
Well, one last thing I guess I have to say about this too is like we're saying like it was just coaching, strictly coaching. One, I think, specific performance that was also huge was Drew Sanders being out. And I know, like we said with the Penn State game, you should still win, right? You can't just point out to him. But do you know how many sacks Alabama had combined, like in this game? 0. They had 0 sacks the entire game.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, 0 sacks the entire game.
Wow.
Drew Sanders, like he came in to actually he was already second string, so we were on our third string like pass rusher on that side.
Yeah, because Chris Allen went out. Like what?
Yeah, so Dallas Turner, he's a 5-star true freshman. He should go in there and produce. But when you're one of your premier pass rushers is hurt, you got to step up. And no one stepped up. Like even Will Anderson, he was getting double teamed every play because he was the only one that anyone was worried about. And when you give, even if he's a backup, if you're blitzing and like bringing extra pressure and still can't get a single sack all game, like they're going to pick you apart. So it was just that. I think that's the biggest like single performance I can say out. And I'm not even saying it's Dallas Turner's fault. Like he's a true freshman who wasn't expected to start, but the entire like defensive line as a whole just did absolutely nothing that game. And I just want to point out, you said Richard Sherman was playing tonight, but he just got hurt. He's out for the rest of the game. Just want to point that out.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm kind of watching the game a little bit out of my peripheral because I started Zach Ertz, and so I'm sure you saw me crack.
Should we do a quick score update?
I'm sure you saw me crack a smile when Zach Ertz scored a touchdown a few minutes ago.
Yeah,
but fantasy team.
I think we should, you're saying you're not as into that game as we are, but I think we should now move on to a game, Fagan, that you are more interested in. Number 17, Arkansas, 4.5-point favorite over Auburn.
Yeah, so this game's going to be a good one. I really like Auburn in this game. I mean, Arkansas has a horrible run defense as we've seen in the past couple weeks. But at the same time, I mean, they were trying to stop the run against the obvious number one team in the country in Georgia, who has a very, very strong run game. And then also Ole Miss, who I'm almost positive is ranked like 10th or 11th in rush yards per game in the country. So, yeah, they gave up 340 yards rushing to Ole Miss, but like Ole Miss averages like 230. So that's not that crazy. But Auburn's got a hell of a backfield in Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter. And the story of this game is going to be whether or not Auburn's offensive line can step up. Because Arkansas is going to let us run the ball if the O-line can block at all. So that's going to be the biggest thing. It's going to be Auburn's O-line against Arkansas's horrible run defense. I don't know which one is going to prevail. I mean, I'm taking Auburn. I think Auburn has the potential to kind of whoop up on them a little bit, but who knows? The only thing that does scare me is that this is in Arkansas. And not just that, it's the way that the game ended last year is what really makes me nervous about this game. Because I don't know if y'all remember this game last year. Auburn had some crazy wins last year that probably shouldn't have really been wins. Either way,
kind of like the Georgia game this year, Georgia Southern or State or whatever it was.
Well, now that one we actually came back, but here's the thing: in the Arkansas game, this was the game last year where Bo got the ball, fumbled the snap, turned around,
where he spiked it backwards,
and spiked the ball backwards.
Such a Bo thing to do.
So
they ruled it an incomplete pass.
Yeah. So that's the only thing that scares me is Arkansas has definitely not forgotten about that. And then they just lost a shootout to Ole Miss after getting spanked by Georgia. They're going to be looking to rebound. The crowd's going to be there getting into it. I'm a little nervous about it, but I believe in Auburn. I think as long as the O-line steps up even a little bit and we run the ball, we commit to the run, then we'll be fine. We'll cover 100% and win the game as long as we stick to the run.
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback real quick off of what you said about Auburn running game. I think both Jarquez Hunter and Tank Bigsby have 100 yards apiece this game, and I think that's, the difference in this game is the fact that y'all have some really good running backs. I think your defense is very solid. I know looked a little bit rough against Georgia, but I think for the most part, there was no plays last week.
Everybody.
Yeah, it's Georgia. There was no plays last week when I was watching the game. I didn't watch the whole game where I was like, ooh, this Auburn defense looks bad. Like, they looked good against Penn State. They've looked pretty solid all year despite, the fact that they're losing these games. I think even though Arkansas scored a lot last week against Ole Miss, like, I don't think they've seen a defense really like Auburn's all year. And so I think that's why, except for A&M. A&M had a good defense, but I think Auburn's defense is very unique. It's kind of hard to compare it to a lot of other defenses. And it does make me nervous that the game is at Arkansas, but I'm going to agree with you in the fact that I think Auburn wins this game outright.
Ooh, 3 for 3, because I picked Auburn as well,
Hey,
I think
we haven't even gotten into our bet.
Baby.
I know, yes.
We haven't even got into our bet slips yet, but we're all on board with Auburn.
Spoiler alert, that one's on mine, and I'm picking Auburn just straight up. But I think the biggest thing, QB contain, right? You look at last week against Ole Miss in a shootout. KJ Jefferson had more rushing attempts than anyone else on the team, right? Whether those were designed or like scrambling. And KJ Jefferson, he's a good college quarterback. I'm still not convinced he's going to pick you apart. Like, I think Ole Miss's like defensive backs are just garbage. And so, he had an okay game against them, but I think against competent like defensive backs, he's not going to sit back there and pick you apart. So as long as you don't let him rush for 200 yards, I think Auburn will do it. And I think Auburn has a pretty good history of having like a really solid defensive line. Just like I can think of Derek Brown and Big Cat, even though he's in UCF now with the
Marlon Davidson,
but all the way back to Nick Fairley,
Yeah. So I'm picking Auburn as well. We actually all agree.
Yeah,
so,
I'm all in on Auburn. I like it a lot. I think the other thing is Bo is going to have to run the ball a little bit too. But I'll leave it at that. We're going to have to stick to the run game, no doubt.
Agreed.
Yeah. So maybe this is probably the game I'm looking forward to the most this week, besides obviously Alabama. Number 1 Georgia, 22-point favorite versus Kentucky. I'll start it off with saying I just don't see a way in which Kentucky wins. Like, they might be able to cover. Like, 22 points is a lot, especially against the number 11 team in the nation who's been on like a pretty hot streak. I don't know if Kentucky can win, but my God, I hope they do for the chaos that would ensue if they do. Like, this is the one game I want Georgia to lose all year, and then Kentucky to win out just so that Kentucky makes the SEC championship. That would be the funniest thing to me.
But this is the year that like something like that type of shit would happen. Like, let's just be real with how it's gone so far, and that's why I'm not going to pick Kentucky to win outright. I think they'll cover the spread, but I would not be really all that surprised if they found a way to win this game. I think when you're looking at Kentucky and the way that their team is constructed, I think they're constructed in a way that they could give Georgia some trouble. What does Georgia do very well? They run the ball. Well, Kentucky is number 3 in the nation in rushing defense. So, that's kind of a toss-up right there. Obviously, I'm sure Georgia will prevail, but they're not going to be able to do what they were able to do against Auburn and do what they were able to do against a lot of these other teams and just hand the ball off to the running backs. Don't let them all just gash the defense on the ground. I think they're going to have to force Stetson Bennett to throw the ball a lot more, and he's been pretty solid this year when he has to throw it. But I think, that's in a limited capacity. I think this game, Kentucky defensively is going to sell out on stopping the run. And so this game, a lot of it will depend on quarterback play, and how good Stetson Bennett really is we'll find out this week. And then on offense, Kentucky, I think, is a solid team. They have a great tandem at running back with Chris Rodriguez and Kavase Smoke. And then you pair that with a very strong, big quarterback like Will Levis, who has some swagger to him. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Johnny Manziel from a swagger standpoint. And he's been pretty solid this year for them as well. And then at receiver, you got, I'm probably mispronouncing this name, but Wandale Robinson. as one of the most explosive playmakers, and I think in all of SEC and maybe just college football as a whole. But I do think they will give Georgia some fits, and I think this will be a tough game for Georgia. But I'm not going to pick them to lose this game. But I do think 22 points is a shit ton of points to cover. It does help them. We keep talking about home field advantage, and we stress that, and it makes a big difference. And so that could definitely play to their favor in this game. But this Kentucky team is solid.
I'm gonna be honest. I don't really know where I stand on this. I think Kentucky will keep it within that range, but I would not be surprised if Georgia just goes out and kills them again. But Georgia's just done it week in, week out. I don't know. I guess part of me is just still like Kentucky's a basketball school. It's tough for me to really commit to this Kentucky football team, but they look good. I mean, they look really good. Like you said, I mean, Levis is doing his job, and the running backs have looked good this year. So we'll see. I'm probably not gonna bet this if I'm being honest, but I'm leaning Kentucky. But my favorite bet in this game is 100% the under. I like the under in this game.
What's the under at?
I don't really even care. I like.
Just whatever it is, bet the under.
Whatever it is, I'm
Elijah
probably
Tucker.
taking it.
Yeah, no matter what.
Let me see. The under is 44.5. Yeah, I like that.
No, I totally get what you mean though by like looking at Kentucky and going, "This is a basketball school." I do the same thing with most SEC teams, like in college basketball. Like I see like Arkansas, for example, from this last year. Every time I watch them, I'm like, Arkansas is not a basketball school, and then they'd go out and win the games. And then or LSU was like
and Auburn and Bama.
Yeah, Auburn and Bama both have been good too recently. Like Bruce Pearl was shirtless in the student section.
That was fucking awesome. That was so sick.
But
I don't know if that's the word I would use for it. Sick in the fact that we had to see Bruce Pearl with his shirt off.
Anyway, you can't tell me if you had the type of guy Bruce Pearl is. Like, I mean, him, Cam Newton, and the fact that Matty Pruitt was there too, and the whole basketball team. It was electric. We're a basketball school now, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, how did the game go? The game didn't go too well, but.
Yeah, but that was good to see. Got us excited for. For a basketball
Sometimes
season.
You got to take the moral victories.
Because you got to think, too, so this past week, too, before the Georgia game, we had our tip-off at Toomers. So that was the same week. So having tip-off at Toomers and then seeing that on Saturday, everybody here is ready for basketball.
You should probably get those tumors checked out. So, Joe.
I hate you because you made that joke because it was a joke that I would make, and that just bothers me.
All right, so I think the last thing we should do tonight is talk about a little bit of our bet slips. I came prepared this week. Last week I didn't have one. Woohoo! Yeah, I did the bare minimum. Applaud me. I actually found some games I like. I can start off since I brought it up. Syracuse. They're 13-point underdogs, 13.5 points. I'm picking them to cover against Clemson. I am. I think Clemson, not good. Syracuse, they've had some up and down games this year. But Syracuse, for some reason, always plays Clemson like pretty decently, from what I remember. Like that, they were before this year were like the last unranked team to beat Clemson, right? In like it was like 2016 or 2017. But
yeah,
I remember that. So I'm actually picking Syracuse to cover there. I'm picking Vanderbilt to cover against South Carolina, which is why would I ever bet on Vanderbilt? Why do I hate myself? But it's an 18-point spread. Both teams are garbage, and Vanderbilt, I mean, I know they played some pretty bad teams this year, but hey, they've won 2 games this year. They're not the 0-10 Vanderbilt that they were last year. You know, they're led by Alabama legend Jason Bulovas, now the kicker. UCF, they're playing, it's Cincinnati, right? I didn't write down who they were playing because I'm dumb. But I'm actually taking the over on points because it was over under 17.5 for UCF. I think, Cincinnati's been pretty good, but the Gus Bus sows chaos everywhere he goes. And so I think that the Gus Bus can manage an 18 points for me. I picked TCU to beat Oklahoma straight up. Every week. I'm gonna say it until I die or Oklahoma wins the national championship. But every week, I think they're gonna lose. Like they're bound for a loss. They keep just squeaking it out. They should have lost this last week, and I would have been fine picking them over TCU. But that's got to explode at some point. And TCU, like you said, has always been pretty good at defense under Gary Patterson. So, 3 more. I got Kentucky covering the spread against Georgia. So I guess I did pick on that one. 22 points. I don't know if they'll win, but I think they'll be able to keep it at least competitive. I don't think they're going to get like completely blown out, and 22 points is a lot. Ole Miss is favored by 2.5 points against Tennessee. And I'm taking that. Like I'm taking them to cover because, I mean, Ole Miss can very easily win by a field goal in my mind against Tennessee.
Strangely low spread on that one.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's like I know Tennessee's been like
they killed Missouri, they killed South Carolina, but
I mean, I'm picking Vanderbilt to cover against South Carolina, so that shows you how I feel about that game. Yeah, Tennessee, but then they got killed by Florida, and so I'm just not sold on Tennessee. And like they lost to Pittsburgh. I know people love Kenny Pickett this year. Apparently, he's another guy that's like I've seen people talking about and hyping up. And then last one, I picked Auburn straight up over Arkansas. I think that as much as it pains me, I'm a believer this week, and we already talked about why. So yeah, those are mine. I came prepared this week.
I'll let Fagan go, and then I'll close it out.
All right. So last week, just to recap, went 3-3, down 1 unit though, because I did put 2 units on Bama. But solid week. We're at 500. No money won, but hey, no money lost. So this week I've got on Friday, tomorrow, I have San Diego State -9 at San Jose State. Then starting off the Saturday games at 11, I got Michigan State -4.5 at Indiana. Even though Joe says that Indiana is a decent team.
Oh, come on.
Penn State's best win of the season.
I'm still taking Michigan State. So, but with Michigan State, I had bet on them like the first 4 weeks in a row. They made me money, and then I hopped off for a couple weeks. But I'm hopping back on that train. That spread should simply just not be that low. I think Michigan State wins out until they start playing the big dogs. Then I've got, I think also at 11, I've got UAB -15.5 at Southern Miss.
What the hell?
Yep. Taking UAB over Southern Miss. Southern Miss only has 1 win on the year, and it's against somebody I'd never even heard of. So taking UAB to win by 16 or more in that one.
You gonna throw up or something?
No, I always anytime I drink anything carbonated, because I don't drink soda at all, I get the little.
I will say real quick, Southern Miss, as their head coach said, like they may have only won 1 game this year, but at least they had Brett Favre at one point.
Yeah.
That's what they said going into the Bama game. He said, "Well, Alabama's never had a player like Brett Favre come through their program," as if that was supposed to hype them up for getting killed. So,
that's a good. I
never had a player like Brett Favre. So.
They ain't got him now, so I'm taking UAB. unless Brett comes out of retirement for the 4th time, I'm taking UAB in that game.
Grambling State.
Yeah, exactly. Then next game, I think UNC's got this weird thing where they're going, since ACC play started, they go win loss. So I'm banking on another win after them losing a bad loss to Florida State last week. I'm taking them to cover by 7.5, but buy it to 7. Buy it to 7 against Miami. Miami's extremely, extremely bad, and De'Aaron King's out for the year. This one kills me to say. It kills me to say, but I'm taking Baylor -6 against BYU. Baylor has BYU's ex-offensive coordinator, the same one from last year that led such a great BYU team. I think that he knows BYU's system well enough, and then Baylor also has what's his name from LSU?
David Arenado.
Yeah,
David Arenado.
So I think Baylor is on the verge of being a really good team. I think BYU was the most overhyped team in the country. So even though still up,
that's a bold claim.
But I'm taking Baylor. Then I've got Liberty -32.5 at ULM. ULM just lost by 34 to Georgia State. Liberty is a much better team. I'm waiting on that one though because I want first half, but I want to see what it is first. I'm taking the spread no matter what, but I might switch to first half depending on what it is. So just check that on Twitter on Saturday. And then my final pick is Army plus 14 at Wisconsin, as well as I hadn't fully decided, possibly the under in that game, but Army plus 14 is definitely going on there.
All right. Well, I guess I'll close it out. I'll take Oregon to cover the points over Cal on Friday night. It makes me a little bit nervous because Oregon just seems to struggle against teams they shouldn't struggle against. And then I'm taking Michigan State to cover the 5 over Indiana. Michigan State's been lights out all year for spread. Of course, I say that, and they'll probably shit the bed this week. And then I like Texas A&M. They're hot off their win against Alabama. I like them to cover the 9 points over Missouri. Kentucky, like I talked about, I'm very high on. 22 points is a lot. I like them to cover that against Georgia. And then I took Auburn money line versus Arkansas. War damn. That's the last time you'll ever hear me say that. But for this week, don't clip that. So those are my picks, and we've been going for a while, and I think that's all I got.
Pretty much it. We'll see if the chaos ensues.
Yeah,
God,
I'm sure I'll group chat.
Please let Kentucky win.
Please.
Just absolute maximum chaos. I want to see the committee have to deal with a one-loss Georgia that didn't make the SEC championship, and how they rank them. I want that more than anything in the world.
We root for chaos on this show because we're chaotic.
But
exactly. Hey, and it just makes the expanded playoff look even better. So,
and I will say, like, real quick, I guess it could also just be a team that no one expects. Like, you look at the powerhouse teams the last couple of years who beat them. It's not the number 11 team in the country. It's like unranked Iowa, or like it was like 20 something Iowa beat Ohio State like 52-6 that one year, knocked them out of the playoffs. Clemson lost to, I think, Syracuse, like I was saying, and they got in trouble for that. So it could be anyone, you know?
Never know.
Yeah, but I mean, that's all I got to say. So
we'll see what happens.
Thank you all for listening in, and we'll continue. I always say this. We'll continue to try and improve every week, and cheers.
Cheers. See y'all next week.
I'm out of drink.
Peace.
Cheers.